What's up, everyone? And yes, for the umpteenth time, your boy is back, but with something hopefully a little better and different than boring gaming videos or shitty creepypastas. I wanted to nerd out over something else that I'm passionate about, and that's music. To be a bit more specific, metal music and one of the many legends within the halls of the metal gods, King Diamond. So join me on this little journey, geek out session, analysis thingy, whatever you want to call it, as in this 3-part series I go over some of my favorite King Diamond albums. A little disclaimer before we begin though, if you have not heard the album we'll be talking about today, or the albums I'll be talking about in the next couple of videos, I highly recommend you go check them out for yourself. With that being said, let's begin our journey with just a little bit of history. So before there was even a King Diamond, the band's namesake and frontman, King Diamond aka Kim Bendix Peterson, was in another band called Merciful Fate. Now whereas King Diamond is more so about horror stories with some of the stories anyway, with elements of Satanism weaved throughout, Merciful Fate was just straight up Satan worship, King being a well-known Satanist.
For Fate, lead singer King Diamond is a Satanist who makes no bones at all about his beliefs. He's declared in a song, "I renounce Christ the Deceiver."
We want to create a little bit of fear. Because I know people like to be scared. Just a little bit, and they like that because they go watching all the horror movies. Yeah. And that's another thing. People don't like our lyrics, because it says Satan now. Then they go and watch Halloween or whatever it is. Yeah. So why don't they just accept our lyrics as, if they don't want to look for messages, then don't. Just take it as horror stories, that's all. I'm not up to preaching to people. That's not what I want to do. I think people should believe whatever they want, and we can be just as good friends no matter what religion you believe in. I think it's important you believe in something. I don't want to preach, but if people want to know something about it, I'm willing to discuss with them. I've had discussions on television in Denmark with priests and...
Oh, really?
Yeah, poor them, yeah. They can't answer my questions, unfortunately, because they go for a religion which was written down by a man's hand, actually, 2,000 years ago, and they still go for that stuff. I admit that half of the Bible is very good, and there are things that you can use in today's society, but the other half is just too old. It's for the trash can.
One thing that occurs to me is that people would say that the devil is the greatest liar of all, and that he's probably sold you down the road, and that you're gravely deluded, and that you don't even know it. How would you respond to that?
The devil has never been allowed to speak for himself. Never. He's always been called, Satan actually means the accuser, or the opposite. The accuser, he's never, the Christians never say anything about what Satan is saying. He never says anything. It's the Christian that says, he's bad, he's doing this, he's doing that. Always a he, it's
I never heard
the power.
It's true.
I always, when I talk to priests, for instance, and I tell them, I just can't believe in God because he's that evil. Evil, what do you mean by that, But if he is so all-powerful and almighty, why can't he come down to earth and show himself to people so that they can see that he's for real and that he's the guy to believe in. Instead, he sits up in his heaven, those people, they don't believe in me, and when that final day comes, I'm going to roast them in hell. And if that's not
terrifying idea.
That's not evil, I don't know what evil is. So I can't believe in that philosophy. Let's get rid of all this old bullshit about Satanists drinking the blood of newborn children and things, because that's one big lie. It's something created by Christians, Satanism isn't dangerous at all, It's a very sound life philosophy, Carry out your feelings, that's it. Have a good life, enjoy yourself. You don't know what's going to happen to you after this life. So why not get the most out of it?
We used to have a skull named Melissa, a real human skull. Unfortunately, it was stolen in Amsterdam, and it was the skull that we made the song after. But now we've got a new one, just as human as the other one. So this one's got to be Melissa's sister. And she used to be a real gypsy! Miss Magic
Eventually, King and the rest of the band's ideas on where to go after their album Don't Break the Oath in 1984 completely diverged.
Merciful Fate exist anymore? Because I left the band right after our last gig, which was in Copenhagen on the 11th of April, and it was due to a lot of things, mostly the musical side of the whole thing, because Hank Sherman, the earlier guitarist, used to write most of Merciful Fate songs. He totally twisted over his musical attitude and wanted to play very poppy music. And I heard material which was supposed to be on the third Merciful Fate album. It just didn't fit Merciful Fate at all.
Because Hank Sherman is now in a band called Fate, who are much more commercial than Merciful Fate ever was.
Definitely, yeah. So that was the main reason. And then again, you know, there was something to do with professional attitudes, the way people dressed up on stage. You know, it just didn't fit into our show.
Yes, he was wearing strange clothes, wasn't he?
Yeah, short trousers. When we played in Washington, you know, he very often appeared in a pink jogging suit, and people was looking really weird at the guy and was saying, is he in the band?
It's
or
a
what?
bit of a contrast with what you're wearing.
Yes, very much, you know, and you could just wear ordinary jeans. That would have been okay, but not even that. So he didn't want to do interviews, installs. You know, it was really a lack of professional attitude. So something had to be done, especially about the music for the third album. Then we changed the name to King Diamond, mainly because we wanted to get better deals, better contracts for albums, and you know, merchandising, all those things. So it was necessary for us to change the name, and King Diamond was the most obvious name for us because everybody knew that name already.
Right, and King Diamond, apart from yourself, also features two other ex-members of Merciful Fate too.
Michael Den on the guitar and Timmy on the bass.
Right, so how does King Diamond differ from Merciful Fate? What's different about this new band?
The show, for one thing, is going to be very different. We're going to use a lot of illusions. We've discussed things with magicians in Copenhagen. It's going to feature a lot of illusions. People are going to see me burn alive on stage. For instance, that's one thing. Won't reveal all the stuff now, but there's going to be things happening that people don't understand is possible. So that's show-wise. We're going to take a lot of the satanic stuff away from the show, build in more magic and mystery. The same thing has been done with the lyrics. We've erased the word Satan and Lucifer from our lyrics because the word Satan actually stands for the powers of the unknown, and that's what I'm still writing about in the lyrics. There's one very long horror story going over 5 songs.
Yeah, we're talking about the new King Diamond album, Fatal Portrait.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So in that way we've approached another, gone into trying to get a bigger audience, bigger approach to the audience.
Yes, because in Merciful Fate you were singing about Satan, Lucifer, whatever you want to call it, quite a lot, and mentioning that in interviews, and I think that put a lot of people off listening to the music.
Yeah, it was really only the hardcore fans that were into our music, and we'd like to get more people interested in our music. Again, the music has changed a little bit, but it's like a natural improvement from our last album, Don't Break the Oath. This one could just as well be the third Merciful Fate album. We tried to make the songs more fluent. A lot of people didn't like our rough cuts in the music, and we sort of erased those rough cuts. It's been more fluent, but there's still loads of weird rhythms, and there's probably more guitar solos than there have been before.
When you were in Merciful Fate, you were asked to talk an awful lot about Satan when you did interviews, because you sang about it in the music.
Yes.
And I think you were kind of misunderstood, actually.
A lot of times, yes.
Just for the record, let's get it straight. What are your beliefs? What sort of code do you live by?
There is a book written by a guy called Anton Santalavey, who lives in San Francisco. In 1966, he came up with the first real established satanic church in America. And he's written a book called The Satanic Bible. And that book is a book I can go for 100%. And it explains 2/3 of the book is pure life philosophy. The last third is about magic, and it's not like people think just all about being evil. It's about accepting both evil and good. Preferably 90% good, 10% evil.
King leaving while the rest of the band renamed to Fate, favoring a much less satanic namesake, look, and everything. 2 years later, however, in 1986, King had assembled his own little posse and formed King Diamond, their first album being Fatal Portrait, which, if any of you were interested, I can absolutely cover one day, as it's not one of the albums I'll be talking about in this little 3-parter. and this new band took off. With the success of Fatal Portrait, there simply had to be more. And a year later, the world was introduced to the demon child known only as Abigail. A little side note, there is actually a graphic novel adaptation of this story that was released back in 2021, which I'm sure fleshes out the tale far better than what I'm going to do here, but for that very purpose, being that this is my interpretation, I'll most likely revisit the graphic novel in a later video, and we can also revisit this very video at the same time and make a little comparison. So without wasting any more of your time, let's get into the story of Abigail. So the way I'm going to personally be telling the stories of these albums is in song order, which is definitely just my way of doing things, so if you perhaps think an event on the timeline goes in a different spot or something like that, let me know what you think in the comments. Also, this is your final spoiler warning. If you want to hear any of the albums I'll be talking about in the next few videos and figure out the stories for yourself, please, 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 go do so now and come on back later to nerd out. Are they gone? Okay, sweet, rock on. Let's get into it with our opening track. Our story begins with a funeral, but this isn't just any funeral. This is the funeral of Abigail LaFay. Oh, it's over before it begins, boys. Back it up, we're going home. But in all seriousness, as I said, this is no normal funeral. Whoever is guiding this funeral says, quote, "We are gathered here tonight to lay to rest Abigail LaFay, who we now know was first born dead on the 7th day of July, 1777. Now keep that date in mind, as it will come up later as a very important plot point. Also, before I get even more ahead into this, I will not be playing the tracks themselves, as, you know how good old YouTube is, don't want the copyright shit taking my stuff out of the algorithm, because I would love for people to see this. The funeral leader continues, Abigail will be nailed to her coffin with 7 silver spikes, 1 through each arm, hand, and knee, and let the last of the 7 be drawn through her mouth so that she may never rise and cause evil again. Who will be the first? I, O'Brien of the Black Horseman. And we're introduced to another character, O'Brien of, well, the Black Horseman, who will come up again very, very soon. But for now, let's move on to the next track, Arrival. Through the summer rain of 1845, the coach had finally arrived to the valley where the crossroads meet below and where all darkness seems to grow. People blame it on the hill where no one dares to go, the mansion with a wonderful glow. We are introduced to Miriam Nadius, who is with child, and Jonathan LaFay, who are currently seeing a group of 7 men on horseback riding in their direction. Yep, it's the Black Horsemen all together this time. The coach stops for them, and LaFay steps out as one of them approaches, advising him that while yes, he may be here to inherit his family's mansion, it'd be in his and Miriam's best interest to turn back now, or, quote, 18 will become 9. Jonathan laughs it off, telling the horseman to get out of his way and that he doesn't believe him one bit, but deep down, that phrase sticks with him. 18 will become 9. What could that possibly mean? But ultimately, the horsemen move along, the horseman noting, someday, you'll need our help, my friend. Now with this whole interaction, I first initially assumed it was O'Brien from the funeral giving LaFay this warning, but because I don't know 100%, I'm just going to stick with it's a horseman, not O'Brien specifically. But with that, everybody proceeds on, and we do as well, with track numero 3, The Mansion in Darkness. Riding up the alley in the rain, with no lights to show the way. How could this ever be their home? So at long last, the couple arrive at their new home, the LaFay Mansion. And from the offset, things seem weird. The mansion being described as a, quote, giant shadow, which was to be an old house where evil rules at night. Hell, sure, the mansion is off, but so are the shadows altogether. Quote, the shadows at the gate. They seem to be alive. This whole property just seems all around evil and, for lack of a better term, well, alive. They head inside where everything was, quote, left untouched except for what the rats had got and the dusts of time that showed its mark. Miriam and Jonathan begin to settle in, quote, armed with candlelight and open eyes. Through the dark, they fought their way until every room was lit again. The act of relighting all of the lamps or torches gives the house some new life, being described as breathing. Quote, the house began to breathe. It seemed to be alive. I could pull this in with all the other strange occurrences, but personally, I'd imagine a house would kind of be like this after so much time just sitting and gathering dust and rats. We continue. As the candlelight began to fade, Jonathan said, let's go to bed. The fireplace had ceased to burn. Going fast to sleep before the dawn, dreaming. But they did not know about the shadow. The shadow on the wall. It really came alive. The shadow on the wall. Sunrise. Now that particular line for me always seems like King is about to talk about how this shadow is like a ghost or something evil just lurking here in this evil feeling, evil looking, at least outsider's mansion. But no, it's just the sun. So with that, next track, The Family Ghost. And this is the part of our story where things start to go south for our happy couple. Things seem to feel a little extra ominous the next night as, quote, the darkness came closer to home. And while Miriam sleeps soundly, Jonathan, who I guess is either just awake there next to her or wakes up like you do in the middle of the night when you gotta get a warm glass of milk, notices the bedroom is, quote, ice cold, but the fire was burning still. And suddenly, a blinding light fills the room and Jonathan's eyes before right before him the specter of a man appears. The family ghost had risen again by the door. He tells Jonathan to not be afraid, introducing himself as Count de la Fay, an ancestor to Jonathan. The Count continues, let me take you to the crypt down below where Abigail rests. Let Miriam sleep. She never would understand. Now come on, let's go. It's time to know. No what? Abigail. And that's just my personal, thought voice on what could be going through Jonathan's head, because it's not like the horseman told him, hey, see if you go there, you're gonna meet one of your ancestors and find out about a corpse just chilling in the cellar as well as all this other wacky shit. All the horseman said was, you go, 18 becomes 9. Thanks for the heads up, brother. Really appreciate that. Anyway, so the Count brings John to the top of the stairs, down into the cellar/crypt thing, where he proceeds to warn him, beware of the slippery stairs, you could easily fall and break your neck. Now, in the song after King sings this line, he lets out one of his oh so iconic cackles. You just hear it for yourself. Break your neck! But I actually interpret this laugh as the spirit of Abigail cackling at the fact that the stairs to her tomb could easily get you killed if you're not careful. Upon reaching the so-called crypt, Jonathan sees, quote, the sarcophagus of a child. Abigail has been in here for years and years, stillborn. I can only assume it's the Count saying this to Jonathan. So now we know that in the cellar of the LaFay mansion is not only a crypt type thing, but a mummified stillborn child. Sorry, that imagery is, that's so creepy. But then, the Count hits him with some even more startling news. The spirit of Abigail is inside your wife. And there's only one way you can stop the rebirth of evil itself. You must take her life now. The interesting thing about these reveals are both the sarcophagus as well as the news of Miriam's possession still doesn't quite explain the horseman's 18 is 9 spiel earlier, which is a masterstroke on King's part in my opinion. Yes, the spirit's inside Miriam, but what does that fully mean? That question will be answered soon enough, but first we get a little bit of history in our next track, the 7th day of July, 1777. Now don't that sound familiar? Before we get into this track, it isn't really clear if this is a story being told by the Count himself to Jonathan, and he's just learning the history, or it's just some history for us, but I'm inclined to believe the second option. It's just a song to help explain the history of Count de la Fay and explain just why there's a crypt below the mansion with a child's sarcophagus inside of it. Count de la Fay uncovered his cheating wife, 9 months of loving and sharing. Oh, it was a bastard child. How could he have been so blind? So after his wife, who is not named, other than being called the Countess here in a moment, has been pregnant for 9 months, the Count comes to find out that she has been cheating on him behind his back, therefore making the child growing inside of her illegitimate and some other dudes. So with that, the Count decides that, quote, no bastard baby will inherit what's mine. It's then revealed that this isn't the first time she's cheated, as, quote, another one of her affairs had left him in despair. So what does he decide to do? So he pushed her down the stairs to die. No, she cried, in 1777 on the 7th day of July. And the results of this action are described in the very next part. The Countess broke her neck, and the embryo came out dead. Excuse me, I am so sorry, but... Ew! That's disgusting. And to add further insult to injury, he burned his beloved wife. And the embryo he gave a name. I know it's embryo, but it's just how King sees it. Just roll with it. Abigail, you must rest in shame. Now, it's implied that over time he becomes, quote, obsessed with a strange idea. He wanted to mummify the girl for the future to find, and he did. I personally wonder what exactly it was that compelled this crazy bastard to have this creepy idea to begin with, and it's not explained further past the fact that it's for the future to find. Like, why? Is it a warning to his future generations that, yeah, this place may be cursed and haunted by my bastard child, and the mummification is to show them that? I don't really know. Let me know any ideas or theories or, well, the answer down below. With that, let's jump on back to 1845 and our very next song, Omens. This song's premise is fairly simple, actually. There's a lot of bad vibes going on around the mansion and I assume the nearby town, as we open with, no one is inside the church, but the bell is ringing. So these omens aren't just at the mansion, they seem. It's like they're all around, possibly further evidenced by the line, for no reason, the flowers are dying. Then, we focused on the deadly omens happening inside the LaFay mansion. Quote, inside the mansion, the air is unbearable, a rotten smell. In the dining room, the table is set for 3. Clearly, Jonathan and Miriam are no longer alone in their own home. Next, Jonathan finds, quote, an empty cradle swaying in the air. He remarks he didn't bring it into the room, asking Miriam if she did. No. And the way that King says this line, like, on the record, makes it seem like Miriam is way off, like, not right. What could be wrong? Well, the very next song gives us our answer, the possession. The very next morning, when the mist was eaten away by the sun, Miriam grew hour by hour, and Jonathan, he cried. He knew the ghost had been telling the truth. So this was 9. The pregnancy would not last overnight. So now, 18 is 9 finally makes sense. The horseman was warning John that if they proceeded to the mansion and lived there, the pregnancy would be sped up to insane speeds due to who else but Abigail. I'm guessing the 9 in this case is 9 hours from 18 weeks, maybe? Just speculation. Help me out here in the comments, people. The now possessed Miriam rocks the cradle and tells Jonathan, I'm having your baby, my love. But Jonathan knew, quote, this wasn't love. No, she was possessed. In the middle of the song, we hear King whisper, I will get what is rightfully mine. I can only assume that this is Abigail speaking to herself, planning her way of being reborn and taking her place in the LaFay bloodline, maybe? But by whatever means necessary, or it's just a whispered veiled threat. Miriam continues to get worse and worse, quote, speaking with different tongues. Then we learn this goes much further than any normal possession, as Miriam is, quote, eaten alive from inside. The baby inside of Miriam must also be possessed, and cannibalizing her to perhaps gain power or perhaps just strength. Again, she said, "I'm having your baby, my love." But it's no use for Abigail to hide anymore, and it's time for a confrontation in our title track, Abigail. Abigail, I know you're in control of her brain, and I know you're the one who's speaking through her. Johnny Boy here is wasting no time in confronting the evil spirit, but Abby's got something to say herself. I am alive inside your wife. Miriam's dead. I am her head. So maybe this confirms that the baby is possessed, so Abigail is able to control Miriam and the baby inside of her, if my cannibalization theory is correct at least. If so, that's a smart-ass demon baby. Abigail, don't you think I know what you've done? I'll get a priest. He'll know how to get her soul back, Jonathan says, but Abigail only lets out a belittling cackle in return. But suddenly, for just a moment, Miriam pulls through. Oh, Jonathan, this is Miriam. Our time is out. Remember the stairs. The only way. So Miriam knows as well. How? No idea, in all honesty. I can only theorize that while she's trapped by Abigail inside her own body, she somehow saw the events of 1777 in Abigail's memory, maybe? Who knows? But with that advice, the new plan goes into action. Nothing I can do but give in. Follow me into the crypt. You ought to be reborn where you died, Abigail. And Abigail says, Jonathan, I agree. Yes, I do. Before reminding him that she is in fact alive inside of his wife, and soon she'll be free. It is now or never. Will Jonathan repeat the cycle, or will he let evil itself be reborn? Let's find out in our final track, The Black Horseman. So there they stood, at the top of the stairs. Miriam in the mood. Jonathan was scared. No idea what the fuck in the mood means in this context, but considering it's a demon, just go ahead, use your imagination, I guess. But now, we get to see just who wins. For a second, he turned his back, and she was there like a ghost. She pushed him hard and clean to the bottom of the stairs. Wow, great going, Jonathan! You let Abigail get away because all of a sudden Miriam goes into a labor, quote, so strong that she dies. Quote, her final seeing was a pair of yellow eyes. And supposedly, you can still hear her screaming if you walk down the stairs in July. So did this whole shit show happen on July 7th of 1845? I mean, it's possible. Quote, riding from beyond, the 7 horsemen would arrive before the dawn, servants of the Count, when Abigail was born the first time. So, you're telling me these horsemen have been around for almost 100 years? A century? Are they immortal? Are they fucking warlocks? We may never know. Just kidding, you will never know, because us King Diamond fans, we don't talk about Abigail 2. I mean, what, Abigail 2 doesn't exist. I'm just kidding. If you personally enjoy Abigail 2, more power to you, but I know I personally don't like the idea of a sequel to begin with, and I'm gonna explain why here in just a minute. The horsemen arrive, and they find the once again newborn Abigail feeding on something which King says he cannot tell us, but I imagine that with the whole thing with Miriam being eaten alive from inside, that Abby was feeding on not only Miriam's course, but maybe Jonathan's as well. Take her and bring her to the chapel in the forest, so go now. The ceremony and the coffin is waiting. So with that, our Lord and King sends us off. That's the end of another lullaby. Now it's time for me to say goodnight. So with that, I'm going to jump back to my little theory and why I don't think this story needs a fucking sequel. It's made pretty clear from that final quote by what I can assume is one of the horsemen, most likely O'Brien, that the quote ceremony is the exact one we hear in the opening track Funeral, which in a way makes the album loop, like no matter how many times Abigail is stopped, she will always be back to torment whoever lives in the mansion next, whether it be another of the LaFay bloodline, or a complete rando getting the mansion for a too-good-to-be-true price, like over a century later. In Abigail 2, spoiler alert if you really want to check that out yourself, Jonathan survives the fall down the stairs now in a wheelchair, but still lives inside the mansion, and Abigail, I'm guessing in that same baby's body, just now grown up, comes back and ultimately kills him. Cool, sure, but I love the idea of that loop so much more. So that is Abigail, and whoo boy, it's a doozy, isn't it? I honestly had a lot of fun going through and giving my interpretation of the story, and I would love to see your guys' thoughts and interpretations in the comments too. In our next part, we will be taking a look at what I think is the darkest King Diamond album/story in his discography, so please stay tuned. And if you made it to the end of this little geek out session, thanks for sticking around. Feel free to share this around with fellow King fans, let them give their thoughts. Thank a million for watching, and I'll see you next time. Rock on loudly!